Good morning. Good morning and welcome to this formal meeting of the Public Protection and Communities Scrutiny Committee. I'm Councillor Nigel Pepper, Chairman of this committee. Councillor Adam Stokes, Vice Chairman, is also in attendance. Can I remind you that the audio-visual feed of this formal public meeting is being broadcast live, that's if things are working better than yesterday, via the County Council's website. And with this in mind, I would like to welcome members of the public watching this live. I'd like to begin with a health and safety announcement. There is no fire drill planned this morning. In the event of the fire alarm sounding, we'll need to leave the council chamber through the rear doors and leave the building through the reception into the front car park and wait there. Can I also remind everyone to ensure their mobiles, laptops and iPads are on silent, please, for the duration of the meeting. Also, may I remind you that the hearing loop is now activated. Requests to speak will be collated by my Vice Chairman. When invited to speak, you should press the button on your microphone unit to make it live. Then press again when you finish your contribution. We'll now move on to the formal agenda. And agenda item 1 is apologies for absence and replacement councillors. Over to you, Trina.
Thank you, Chairman. We've received apologies from Councillor Brockway, from Councillor Danny, from Councillor King, but Councillor King will be observing the meeting remotely today. And we've also received apologies from Councillor Woolley, Executive Councillor of NHS Liaison, Community Engagement, Registration Coroners, and Councillor Morn, Executive Support Councillor for Fire and Rescue and Cultural Services. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Did I understand that Councillor Matthews is hoping to attend the meeting also?
He is, Chairman. He's going to join after 11.
Okay, thank you. So, agenda item 2, declaration of council's interests. Do any members wish to declare any interest which they haven't done already? Sorry, Councillor Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. I thought I'd come in now. I haven't actually got a declaration of interest, but I would like to express my thanks to the Fire and Rescue Service for the most uplifting evening the other night on their medals presentation. It was so nice to hear of the wonderful acts that they'd carried out under the commendations, and certainly it was a surprise to know how many lengths of service some of them had carried out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That was nicely slipped in there under the declaration of interest, but thank you for that. Okay, so moving on. Item 3, minutes of the previous meeting of the Public Protection and Communities Scrutiny Committee held on the 20th of September. This item is to approve and sign the minutes of the last meeting as a correct record of the previous meeting. They can be found on pages 5 to 16 of the agenda pack, and I'll just go through those page by page for accuracy only before you decide to slip anything else in. Yeah. So page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 and finally page 15. Do I have a proposer for those minutes, please? So I've got Councillor Stokes proposer. Do you have a seconder, please? Councillor Sneath has seconded. We'll now vote. So all those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. Those against? And any abstentions? Got 3 abstentions here. All noted? Thank you. Thank you. Those minutes are agreed as a correct and accurate record. Moving on to item 4, announcements by the Chairman, Executive Councillors and Lead Officers. From my point of view, we have a lighter agenda today. However, I'd like to remind officers that all reports presented today should be taken as read. Therefore, presenters are asked to only summarise key points of their reports submitted. May I also remind members the importance of succinct questions and contributions that will allow for efficient and effective use of the time allocated for each discussion. Also, I'd like to inform members that the visit to the County Emergency Planning Centre that took place on the 30th of September was beneficial and served with a reminder that members have an important and active role to play in emergencies. If you require further information around this, please contact the Scrutiny Officer following this meeting. And lastly, I also attended the Fire and Rescue Long Service Awards ceremony on Thursday evening along with other councillors, and I have to say what a proud moment it was for many. So I echo your thoughts there, Councillor Clark. Thank you. Executive Council announcements. Do we have any executive? Councillor Corey.
Thank you, Chairman. It was nice to see you at the Long Service Awards last week, and it was also nice to see Councillor Clark, and thank you for your kind words, Councillor Clark. In addition to that, if people haven't already become aware, last week Arts Council England awarded Lincolnshire County Council in excess of £206,000 a year as part of the National Portfolio Organisation 3-year funding settlement, and this will allow us to put into action lots of plans that we had for the Usher Gallery and the collection. This is something that we wanted to do for a long time, but we had to wait until the next funding round was available. We applied for it in May, and we were successful. So I just wanted to thank all colleagues in cultural services for putting that together and for their successful bid. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Corey. Are there any other executive member announcements via Teams or anything going on? No. Okay. Similarly, senior officer announcements? None. Nothing on Teams. Oh, sorry, Nicole. Does Nicole wish to make an announcement?
No, thank you very much, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. We'll now move on then to item 5, which is the fire and rescue attendance at flooding incidents, the annual report on performance. The item can be found on pages 17 to 24 of the agenda pack and is an update on the flooding incidents that Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue has attended since 2017 to enable members to be aware of the risk in Lincolnshire. Our actions for today are that the committee is invited to consider the contents of this report and comment on the fire services approach to supporting the local communities. The report will be presented by Mark Baxter, Chief Fire Officer. So without further ado, over to you, Mark.
Yeah, many thanks, Councillor. So in regards to the report that we're just presenting, as you said, this is a 4-year trend analysis that we will present on a yearly basis as part of our commitment, just to identify what fire and rescue's capability and capacity is there to respond to flooding across the county. What we've, within the report, what we've identified is that over the 4-year period, we're looking on average of around about 90 incidents that just purely fire and rescue attend. And it's important that this report is focusing on it's only the fire and rescue's activities. Bearing in mind there's an awful lot of support, prevention work and response work that happens with many of our other Lincolnshire County Council partners and partner agencies. But this is just focusing on fire and rescue. So we're attending approximately 90 per year type incidents, but recognising that we've had a couple of years where we've had significant spikes, particularly in regards to the Wainfleet incidents that we had back in 2019, and also a period of flooding that we had just around about the Christmas time in 2020, around at the south of the county, around the Spalding area, which obviously does increase the average rate. If we took those spikes out of the equation, then we're still averaging around about 80 events a year that we are responding to. The graphs in the report below kind of articulate that in a graphical representation. I think that what does stand out is when we do have the, and we'll call these the significant events that happen periodically. In the 1920 year, when that happened in Wainfleet, you can see how much of a spike of activity. That was up to 345 separate incidents we attended because of the severe weather event that happened during that period. We tried to do some analysis on trying to look at a range of predictions of when is our highest risk times of the year when we responding to flood events. It's always going to be difficult to predict weather fronts coming across the United Kingdom on the East Coast. But over the last 4 years, we do get a banding of 3 months relatively in the summer months, around about June, July, August, where we seem to have more highest risk of flooding, and also about 3 months around about November, December, January of a year where we do have the trends that come through on average. So what that means for us within fire and rescue, of course, we're stood up to respond to flooding events at any time during the year, but we do always ensure that coming into the summer months and coming into the winter months that we ensure that all our training and our guidance notes and all our preparations are absolutely being reviewed to ensure that we are always prepared to respond. In other elements that we've analysed is the type of response that is required from fire and rescue. It is still overwhelmingly required that our fire engines, our fire appliances are the main source of capability that is required. That is because these our fire engines have the main pumping capacity, and also within our fire appliances we have low-level submersible pumps on every appliance, and they're specifically designed to be able to pump out low-level flooding, particularly in regards to people's properties. And also every one of our firefighters have the required PPE, flood rescue suits, and they have flood rescue training so they'll be able to respond to all flooding incidents. We also have a significant request on our advice and support. What that means is we do respond to all calls where the caller is identifying that either flooding is going into their property or they are in danger and there is a danger of life. We will respond to every one of those incidents. We often respond by sending an officer to give a risk assessment to understand the actual risk of the flooding to the individual and the individual's property. And we often leave them premises by giving flood safety advice and ensuring that the residents are ensuring that they are safe. If we have any doubt that we need interventions to ensure that their safety is required, then we will mobilise additional resources to that property. Other areas that we've analysed is whereabouts in the county we seem to be getting the main flooding. I suppose we do get it across the county. There isn't anywhere that is immune, but across the east coast and round in the south of the county do seem to be the two areas that we do have more demand. I wouldn't say that it was significantly more than anywhere else, but our east coast and our south area of the county do have more demand for flooding incidents. We have broken that down into station areas, and particularly the Skegness area and Spalding area have been identified, but I will caveat that because obviously we had the Wayne floodings and we had the Christmas time floodings in those both areas during this time period. But it isn't surprising that we know that East Coast and the South is probably the two areas. The area that we are we analysed was the amount of assets that we respond and utilise, and as I mentioned earlier, our pumping appliances are the main asset we use. We do utilise our boats and our crafts, so we often use our rescue rafts. They are it's a low-level raft that is particularly useful in low-level flooding to be able to bring people, pets, or anything that we require to get out of property. So they are utilised when required, and we have used the flood pumps that have been bought in partnership with local Lead Flood Authority Environment Agency. They've been utilised successfully during significant protracted flooding incidents as well. I think the final thing I probably would like to probably just mention in regards to this report, severe weather is absolutely recognised of one of our real and even emerging risks for our response, and I think that probably affects every area within Lincolnshire County Council. In regards to fire and rescue, we are now prepared and we are looking at the future impacts of what severe weather is going to have within our county. We know that flooding incidents and significant flooding incidents are here and they are real, and we need to respond to them. And I think the report does identify that we've got a very significant and an appropriate capabilities that's able to deal with all types of flooding, whether it's low-level flooding, whether it's flowing water flooding, or whether it's high-rise and protracted incidents. We've got assets across the whole of the county placed in strategic locations, and we've got the trained staff from all the way through from just walking in low-level flooding to all the way through swift water training, which is when we're using power boats with against significant high-rise flooding. So I'm confident that we have got the appropriate capabilities and capacity to meet the future demands, which will be, to a degree, difficult to predict. It's difficult to predict when we will be getting significant floodings and weather warnings, but I think one thing we are confident is they will still be here, and they will be coming as a risk for us to be able to respond to. And happy to take questions, Councillor, in regards to the report.
Okay, thank you. I'll now open up for questions. I can see we've got one here already. Councillor Key.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm aware of a couple of incidents in my sort of more local area where the fire brigade was called to flooding incidents, and they were because of blocked drains and issues like that. If you're called out to something like that, is there any liaison then between your service and our highways department to sort of make them aware of what's happened? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, good question, and it's useful to put the context in regards to how we operate. In regards to flooding incidents, no agency operates this on their own. We have a very well embedded and strong communication links with all agencies, whether that's with our internal draining boards, whether it's through our local lead flood authority, whether it's through highways, police, Anglian Water, the list goes on. When we are responding to flooding incidents, our control centre, they have the list of contacts that they directly liaise with. We very quickly stand up our emergency planning team that also do liaison with all agencies and partner agencies to bring together. If the event or the incident starts to become protracted and we are requiring more agencies, then we will pull together a tactical coordination group to bring all of the agencies together to look at a collective way how we can respond to such incidents, particularly if they're going to be more widespread. But absolutely, this isn't a single agency response to flooding, because no one single agency is able to respond to it. But to give you the assurance, we have a very, very well embedded and clear communications with all agencies.
May I just come back, Mr. Chairman? I was perhaps meaning afterwards. Is there any communication to highways afterwards to tell them about what happened if they haven't been involved in the response, just so that they can get the problem sorted out and aware that it's become more serious? That's sort of what I meant.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So during the event, it's part of our standard actions that we do liaise with, particularly in regards to highways, to inform them of the incidents and the events that we have attended and what the impact is. So that's to put it in base terms, it's part of our checklist of agencies we inform.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sneath.
Thank you, Chair. 2 points, if I may, but I'll keep them brief. On page 22, Mark, I'm from Spalding, so this one actually relates to Spalding, where everyone else has got the turquoise bit at the end of their purple bit, Spalding hasn't. But I know we've had flooding incidents because I've still got people living in caravans since the flooding in August, and I know you attended. I just wondered why that wasn't on there. And the other point is about picking up a bit on Councillor Key's. The problem we're getting is so much that our gullies need cleaning out so much more. And because we're having a lot of roadworks done, building a new road, etc., the roads are being swept to keep them clean, but all that debris is going down the drains and blocking our drains. And we need, I'd like to speak to highways about this. We need the gully suckers there regularly, not just when we're desperate. We need them sort of every 6 months, actually. So those 2 points, please. But and the highways one isn't one you can answer, but it's just something I wanted to raise. Thank you.
No, I absolutely recognise the reason why you raised that as a question. In regards to the purple data, what I can do is I can break down that information in regards to numbers per year and be able to send that through over to you if that will be helpful, so you can absolutely have that broken down into that level of detail for Spalding. And the second point, all I would like to reiterate is absolutely flooding is a multi-agency response, and there's many facets that all of the county councils departments are working together to try and do the preventative elements in regards to the floodings. I think the report that we're just trying to identify here is about the fire and rescue demand on and what we have to do when we get to that response, but absolutely it's a full multi-agency responsibility in this area.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mr Clark, followed by Councillor Mrs Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. There was a lot of data on your graphs. How often do you review that so you can adjust your works accordingly? And similarly, I noticed, and you did mention it about boats. Are they all rubberised boats, or do you have any hard skin to cope with a particular problem that you might have? And similarly, and I'll ask the question, but I assume it's already set in stone, as it were, collaboration with surrounding forces. So if we've got a problem or they've got a problem, there's instant communication so support can be given. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. So in regards to the review period, part of our risk analysis across the county, we review this on an annual basis. And part of that analysis is to identify where our risk areas are across all areas that we respond to, but particularly in regards to flooding, is part of our annual review linked into our integrated risk management plan, that we absolutely do this work and analyse the data on an annual basis. In regards to the type of boats and the crafts that we have different types of boats, and I'll use the word crafts because they're not all boats. And I'm paying particular attention in regards to the rescue rafts that we've secured, which actually probably are the best form of craft capability that we have for the majority of the incidents that we attend to within the county. These are big inflatable paths that are able to get more people on and more equipment on, and whatever we need to be able to transport in particularly low level flooding, which is probably where our greatest demand is. In regards to do we have a rigid boat, we've had one rigid boat that we've had in service for many years. The demand for that boat is pretty much been negligent, so we are reviewing whether we still need that one capability of a rigid boat when we're looking at what the demand is. What we found is that when the boats that we do require are more the rubberized inflatable boats that are more easily to get to, hard to reach locations that we can inflate on site, and then we can launch at very awkward positions across all of our waterways, which is really what we require at this moment in time. In regards to your final point, which it's useful point to raise, so to give me the opportunity just to explain that, we are intrinsically linked into what's called national resilience, which is the national coordination of all flood rescue assets across the whole of the country. Immediately when we or any other fire and rescue service get a significant flooding incident, national resilience are informed, and through our control centre we have direct liaison to keep informed and monitoring of the progress of that. If we require any additional assets, either immediately or if we can predict that in the next 8 hours, 24 hours, 7 days a week, we have the ability to call on those assets, and we will receive whatever is the required capability, whether it's personnel, whether it's just specialist advice, or whether it's specialist boats and equipment from all areas of the country, and that will be coordinated through national resilience. Conversely, we often, and we have supported other fire and rescue services nationally as well when they've had significant flooding incidents, to be able to share our specialist teams and our specialist equipment. It is a very well embedded process that's all managed through National Resilience.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks, Mark. Thanks for the report. Always interesting to see those figures and stuff, and it's well received. Thank you so much. I just want to labour a point, though, made by two of my colleagues. In St Giles, on the older estate area, we do have quite a serious problem with surface water flooding, particularly now that the weather is changing and we're getting heavy downpours. So in certain parts of it, it's blowing drains and things like that. Now, I know that you probably wouldn't deal with that. That would be a highways issue. But if somebody were to contact yourselves, would you respond or do you pass that on? I just need to know the pathway for that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. If we get a call through into our call centre, our trained staff within our control centre assess the level of flooding and the risk from having the conversations with the 999 caller. If we've got any doubt or we're unclear what the level of risk is, i.e. is it affecting the property, is it affecting life, we will respond. So that may be immediately sending a fire engine, or at the very least we'll send an officer to physically go down there, assess the whole of the situation. If it is a question that it's surface flooding that isn't going into a property and there is no danger of life, then we will liaise with a responsible agency, for example highways, particularly if it's going to create an issue within any of our roadways network and our infrastructure. We would link that through. We would link that through even if we did respond and then we did some pumping out. So it's at that point, once we've assessed the situation, through our control room, they would have the communications in regards to which agency needs to be informed.
Mark, on page 22, you sort of might have expect Skegness to be at the top of the list, but Spalding to be second highest. Why is that? I'm aware a really heavy downpour anywhere can screw the figures, but is Spalding low-lying? Is there anything to do with the river running through it? What are the influences in general? Or is it just down to a spate downpour?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I think it's predominantly down to spate downpours, and as we know, they can happen anywhere within the county, and I don't think any area is immune to the fact that when we have a significant spate downpour in a short amount of time, it is difficult for the ground to absorb that in sufficient time, and it does have an impact on regards to surface flooding, particularly when we're having more extreme weather conditions. An example would be expecting when I'm reporting on this time next year, and we're looking at when we had really hot weather all the way during the summer. I think literally a couple of days when the weather temperatures dropped, we had spate downpours, and that immediately created flooding situations across areas within the county. That seems to be becoming more and more of a trend in regards to having how our ground works, the ability to be able to absorb significant downpours in short spaces of time. If I'm honest with you, I'm unclear what the answer is in regards to that, because it is a weather phenomenon as much as it is about anything to do with infrastructure and support in there. But that could be at Spalding, it could be at Sleaford, it could be at Holbeach. It will be literally depending where the weather front comes in.
Okay, thank you. On the table on page 23, it mentions 3 different types of pump there. Presumably where it says pump, that's just your standard fire appliance, but there's also flood pump and high volume pump. For the benefit of the committee, can you just tell us the difference in those pumps and what situations you would use them, please?
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. The pump in there is our standard fire appliance, which I think people are more familiar with, what we traditionally see across the county. The flood pumps are the joint flood pumps that we procured through with the local lead flood authority and also with the Environment Agency. They are dedicated pumps that we can take to a scene that's towed on a trailer. The real benefit of those pumps are that we can put them in situ, and they can be crewed with just 2 people, and they can be left in situ, and they can pump significant amounts of water without the need of us having several fire appliances tied up in that area. So they're more flexible, they can pump larger volumes of water, and it enables us to release our fire appliances to be able to respond to other areas within the county. Our high volume pump is a dedicated pump that is, as it states, it creates extremely high volume water pumps. That comes along with what's called our hose layer. That has extremely large diameter hose that can be used over about 5 kilometres. So we can put that pump in situ and then lay out hose over a 5 kilometre space, and that will be a pump that we would use to put in situ for protracted incidents, and it can sit there for many days, and it will just pump away large significant volumes of water. So that pump is on a lot of our predetermined attendance on some of our particularly high risk premises where we know we have issues in regards to accessing of water. And it is also called early when we know we have protracted incidents where we need to be moving a large volume of water. Again, they can be left in situ with minimal crewing, which means that we don't have to tie up many other fire appliances to keep moving water around the county. I hope that explains that one.
Yes, very well, thank you. You mentioned, Mark, about the first call goes into fire control. An assessment is made on what resources to send, indeed if any resources are sent at all. I'm aware that, going back to old money, an inch of water in a property can cause as much upheaval and damage as, say, a foot of water, yeah? And I'm just thinking now, what questions do control ask to determine what resources are sent? And leading on to that as well, I had a call about 11 o'clock one night a month or so ago because somebody got a burst water main out their property, yeah? And they was craving for some sandbags. I know sandbags came to this committee probably a year or so ago. How does that tie in with that, or do they just have to get in touch with highways for that?
So in regards to our control personnel, the critical question or the information they get from the caller is whether the flooding is entering their property. If it is entering the property or it's about to enter the property, depending on, we glean information about the type of property, that's when we will be sending a resource, whether it's an officer to assess or whether it is significant. If a caller is saying we're knee high in water inside the property, straight away we'll be sending all of our pumping equipment. If it's the other end where they're saying actually it's looking like the flooding is going to come into our property, we will send an officer there to respond to see if we can prevent it from going in, or there is imminent danger that we can start doing some pumping out to divert the water away. The reason why we will send resources, we recognise the risk as soon as flooding starts going into properties. There's a risk of getting into the electrics. It can create a risk of fire within the home, and we also, as you say, we're recognising how devastating an inch of water in somebody's property can be as much as a flood of water. So clearly we want to protect our communities as much as we can. In regards to the sandbag question, that responsibility lies with our district councils. In regards to providing the sandbags, we have very good links through our emergency planning department. We would be linking in through emergency planning, who would make the links to the associated area to look at the required delivery of and how we can supply sandbags to protect property. Our role within this is more of a conduit role to ensure that we can assess and we can assist in bringing the partners together, but that will be an emergency planning function that will coordinate that on behalf of the communities.
Okay, thank you. I'm just looking around, no further speakers. No, I've got one or two more questions then. So are you satisfied that the resources you've got are strategically placed for the flooding incidents?
Yeah, the strategic location of our all of our flooding capabilities is something that we do continually review, and it's quite a matrix that we need to go through to ensure that we've got that right. I think the first thing I'd like to say is I think as a county we've been very well supported by Lincolnshire County Council in regards to the amount and the types and the varied types of flooding capabilities that we have to offer our communities, which I think is right and appropriate to meet the risks that we do have within Lincolnshire. In regards to the locations, we need to balance in regards to having those capabilities near enough and around where the actual risks are, but also not being in the middle of where the risks. And what I mean by that is it would not be wise for us to put all of our flood rescue assets and capabilities in the middle of where we have our highest risk, because they could be flooded, and straight away that takes away some of that capability. So we need to be around and near where those flood risks are. Another element that we need to factor into the matrix is we need to ensure that we can spread our capabilities across the whole of the county for resilience purposes. Because while we're responding to flooding incidents, we still have other statutory duties that we will be responding to at the same time. For example, we'll still need to be going to responding to fires, to road traffic collisions, etc. So I suppose another way of putting it, we can't put all our eggs in one basket to ensure that we've just got all of our capabilities on a fewer amount of stations. So we do look at spreading that capabilities across the whole of the county so we're able to respond. That gives us the balance that we've got our the mixture of the flood capabilities that are available to immediately respond, but also particularly when we're talking about protracted incidents, we can call on our assets from other areas of the counties to come in and cover those areas as and when we need it. So again, it's continually being reviewed and we continually monitor that, but I'm confident that we've got them in the right place as we speak.
Okay, thank you. And levels of PPE, Mark, do you have different levels of PPE? I'm just thinking now if there is an inch or so of water, I mean, wellies would probably suffice, but if it's over your head, you probably need a diving suit. So that's one extreme to the... So what levels of PPE do you have as the flood waters increase in height or depth?
So every single firefighter within the county is trained to what we call a flood type D responder. So every firefighter has access to a flood response dry suit. They have access to various equipment and training that enables them to operate absolutely in low level flooding, round about ankle deep surface flooding. So everybody is trained in regards to that. Then it is absolutely incrementally increased to the highest end of PPE. We have our swift water rescue team, which is a type B capability. Forgive my technical jargon in there, but what that basically means is they have the training, they have the specialist dry suits, they have the very specific standards in regards to headwear and all ancillary equipment that enables them to operate in fast flow flooding water and to operate a power boat, so engine operators as well. So that's the highest level that we have in regards to that. The area that we don't get involved in is subsurface incidents in regards to flooding. That's an area that we haven't got a capability for. We work in partnership with our police colleagues who have the capability to respond to subsurface incidents. We don't have that level of training or the correct equipment to be able to go under the waters, but we do operate to fast flowing water all the way through down to just very low level.
Thank you. I'll only trouble you with one more, even though I've got some more here if you wanted them, but just a matter of health and safety. I'm just thinking now if you're walking along a flooded road, can't actually see the road, there could be a manhole cover that's come up, which is possible during flooded situations, and it could be displaced or whatever. Do you have any kind of detection equipment to save firefighters actually walking or stepping into that hole?
Yeah, and it's a really useful point to highlight, and it's one of the areas that we try to promote to members of the public, and that's the main reason why we're saying if there is low level flooding within on the road network, don't go through the flooded water. It may be inconvenient for people to be a diversion, but the risks below that surface are really significant. The example you're talking about, if there has been a manhole cover that has been displaced and anybody walking through it or driving the car through it, if you go within there, it can be quite catastrophic. So it's a really important water safety message that we do not want people to be going in regards to even low level flooding water. Our crews are specifically trained in regards to how to operate in there. They have specific techniques on how they walk through the water. The most basic but the most effective equipment is they have long poles that they will be testing the ground in front of them continually all the way through to ensure that the ground is safe. And they work very methodically, very structured to ensure that they work as a team to ensure that we mitigate that risk. But it is absolutely one of the probably unseen and probably unappreciated high risks that we have, but that we have within low-level flooding.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Councillor Key.
Yeah, could I just come back to that point? Because I think it is something that happens a lot in Lincolnshire, this shallow flooding on the roads, and maybe that could be a winter campaign, because we're all guilty of driving through water thinking, oh, it's not too deep, but walking through it particularly. And I think that would be a really good safety message for the council to give out over the winter, because it happens everywhere, that does. So that's a really good point that I hadn't thought about. Thank you.
No, happy to take that and work with their county council partners in regards to push that message, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. That looks like concludes the questions. So I'm going to move that we receive the report presented and record our satisfaction in relation to the service performance recorded. I also ask that our comments and suggestions from today's discussion are taken under consideration by officers as recorded. Can members please raise your hand if you agree? Thank you. That's all agreed. Moving on to item 6, Lincolnshire crewing arrangements consultation outcome. The item can be found on pages 25 to 28 of the agenda pack and describes and informs the committee of the outcomes of the Lincolnshire crewing arrangements consultation. Our actions for today is that the committee is invited to review and comment on the contents of this report, and the proposed changes aim to address the recommendations of the consultation, all of which have been considered by the Executive Councillor for Fire and Rescue and Cultural Services prior to decision being made to implement these. Again, this report will be presented by Mark Baxter, the Chief Fire Officer. So over to you again, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. So this is a follow-on for the report that we presented at previous scrutiny committee meetings, and just to outline the actions that we was involved in during this consultation process. That was primarily in regards to the reviewing of our Lincolnshire crewing arrangements, with the most significant recommendation was that we changed how Sleaford Fire Station is crewed, and the outcome of that was that we would be moving our whole-time personnel from, instead of having 24/7 being on the station, that we'd move to them being on the station 7 days a week during day hours, and the nighttime cover will be provided by our on-call personnel. During this consultation process, we had sessions held at Sleaford Fire Stations and engaged with all members of the teams there. We also engaged with other stations across the county in regards to impacts of a Lincolnshire crewing system on other stations. We took the time to visit Sleaford Town Council public meeting and presented what the recommendations in regards to what the impacts and what the proposals were. And we also sat and we linked in with the Fire Brigades Union, working through the proposals. Although we've been extremely well linked in with the Fire Brigades Union in regards to putting the recommendations together, we also formally had the opportunity to receive their comments from the consultation recommendations. Outcomes of the that process, there was discussions, particularly from Sleaford Town Council, around some views that we would be potentially moving some of the assets from Sleaford to Boston. We was able to confirm that this was not part of the recommendations, and we have no intention of moving assets away from Sleaford Station. There were questions in regards to the snorkel type exhaust in regards to the appliance at Sleaford, and again we confirmed that again this wasn't part of our any recommendations or our consultations. However, we was happy to take that point of view in regards to any future considerations about appliance design. There was the point in regards to some of the issues that the Sleaford one-way system has in regards to enabling to get people through the town, and it's particularly during the day. And we confirmed that we was aware of this, and that's one of the primary reasons why we've committed to keeping a whole-time crew on station during the day, 7 days a week, to ensure that there is always going to be that immediate response there. And then we was just confirming the position in regards to any perceived savings that we was trying to make from this recommendation, which equated to approximately £30,000, and we just wanted to confirm the position. These aren't savings that we are realising. This is the budget that is utilised for the whole time's additional allowances, that we would be reinvesting that money into our on-call staff at Sleaford to ensure that actually we're not making a savings, we're just diverting that budget onto our on-call staff to ensure that we've got we're investing on that capability at that station. Fire Brigades Union, in writing, they welcomed the proposals. That they'd worked very closely alongside us during the whole of this process, which I did. I wanted to welcome their input and their design of this process. Their request was to delay the implementation until 2023, and this was primarily focused on recognising that although there is going to be a less demand on our whole-time personnel in regards to them being away from their families, did recognise, and this would be a removal of their nighttime allowances, and in the climate of cost of living, they just wanted to ensure that we're not going to put any of our staff under any unduly financial stress. So we've recognised that, and we have delayed the implementation until 2023. Again, during the consultation process, we've been engaging with all whole-time staff across the county, and we are in the process of seeing where personnel wish to serve. It is absolutely our intention that we're not going to impose, as a first point of call, that people will work at designated stations. First of all, we are going out to all of our staff, because we have different models that we have now available, which actually does give us a more flexible duty patterns across the county, which does assist in some of the feedback that we had, that we need to be more family friendly, and we need to be recognising the demands that when people are away from their families 4 or 5 days in a row, that isn't conducive to how people operate, that we are putting out requests on where people would like to serve before we get to any decisions about where we would impose anybody serving. So we're just going through that process at this moment in time. And then there's just, and recognising, and apologies, there is a slight typo in regards to the dates that's been identified in regards to the actions. The first actions from October through to November are 2022, not 2023. But we are actually in the process now of that piece of work where we're just identifying what the rota patterns are and where personnel would fit across the county to ensure that we maintain our 24 level of response, and we also maintain the objective, which was trying to implement a duty pattern that both achieves the objective of being able to respond to our communities, but also recognises the family-friendly requirement to ensure that our staff have that balance between being with their families when they need to be, but also being available at our operational stations. Happy to have questions, councillors.
Okay, thank you, Mark. I'll now invite members to speak. Councillor Key.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I'm really pleased about the staff consultations, but obviously I'm here to represent the residents, and my division covers part of it just comes into Sleaford. and I've got you again, so I'll ask you probably the same question that I asked you last time, but it's worth repeating, I think. What assurances can you give the residents that these changes won't affect response times or effectiveness of the fire service for them? Because that's the most important thing for the residents. Thank you.
Absolutely, Councillor, and we wouldn't be putting forward any recommendations without it being evidence-based. The initiation of this piece of work was, absolutely, it was about responding to some of the concerns we had about our staff and their welfare. But we was very clear we was not going to put through any recommendations unless we had the data to prove that it would not have a detriment to residents. In regards to the Sleaford area, the data which recognising there was an awful lot of data sets that we presented in the first paper was confirming the risk profiling of the Sleaford area and the times of day when the highest risks are, and that is one of the reasons why we was very, very clear that we needed to have whole-time personnel at Sleaford during the day, 7 days a week. In regards to the nighttime cover, even when we do have whole-time personnel covering at that station, they have an options to either currently they have options to either staying in our accommodation that we've purposely built next to the station, or if they live within 5 minutes of the station, they can respond from their home, which is exactly the same arrangements we have for our on-call personnel. So by default, our quickest response is always going to be on the basis of the last person coming into the station. So because some of there is a couple of our whole-time personnel that do live at their own address within 5 minutes of the station, the response times at night will still be on the same level of they have 5 minutes to get into the station, which I'm just reiterating, that is exactly the same as our on-call personnel. So we're not anticipating to be seeing a detriment in regards to our operational response model. The assurance that I would like to give you is actually part of this process, so that we've committed to having a quarterly review of performance of Sleaford Station, and then we'll have a deeper review on an annual basis to ensure that is realised. And our commitment is, if we are seeing a significant reduction in performance, that we feel that it is putting the communities at high risk, then we'll happy to reconsult and put any changes in place.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry to repeat myself, but I think that was really worth hearing for my residents. Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you.
Mark, regarding the quarterly review, I'd like to think it comes back to this committee at some point in time, maybe when it's embedded in 6 months' time or something like that, next autumn time. Would that be possible to bring it back to this committee to see how things are?
Yeah, happy to bring a summary of that report to scrutiny, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lee.
Thanks. I'm pleased. I've spoken to the FBU, and I know that they are broadly happy with it, aren't they? And I'm glad they took part. I take your point, Andrew, about communities as well. We're here to represent communities, but firefighters are part of those communities. And, you know, where I work, if you haven't got happy staff, your service delivery isn't as good as it could be. So I think it's actually really important that they're happy with these arrangements so that the whole thing works for everyone. And I'm pleased we're going to review it as well, because then we'll know that it does work for everyone, won't we? Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And give assurance, we've heavily worked with the personnel at Sleaford, and actually the bulk of the personnel in there are either happy to stay at Sleaford because it suits their arrangements, and other personnel we will look at going to stations where they want to carry on doing the evening commitments. So we're working through that with our staff as we speak.
Thank you. Can't see anyone else wishing to speak. I couldn't see any information, Mark, on how well attended the engagement sessions were. Are you confident that staff was adequately engaged?
Yeah, absolutely, because it was very key to us, and we've looked at this in two ways. Spencer Creek, our area manager response, rightly took the time to go and visit the stations and sit down with them on several occasions to ensure that we actually sat down and had face-to-face discussions. but that's just during the consultation process. All the way through this project work leading up to that, we'd been engaging with our staff and also particularly through the Fire Brigades Union to ensure that everybody was cited on what the proposals will be and basically fed into what some of the recommendations were. So I am confident that we've done the appropriate level of engagement.
And moving on from that engagement, on page 26 towards the bottom it says, during the consultation period, staff were asked to complete an expressions of interest form to determine where they would prefer to work based on the duty system in use at that station. 48 of the 76 staff engaged and completed the form. That is 63% of the staff engaged in that. So what happens with the rest of the staff who didn't engage? Do they just get randomly allocated a station, or is it proximate to the station where they live? What happens to those?
So the 48 out of the 76 that were engaging with them, they were predominantly the ones that wanted to either change or to confirm where they are. We've also got engagement through our divisional commanders who work locally to ensure that staff are clear where they wanted to be. The significant feedback that we're getting that most people are happy to stay exactly where they are. So even out of those 48, the high percentage are they're happy to stay at the stations that they are currently serving at. We're confident that we know of all personnel now who wish to move, that we have that information, and that's what we're working. But during this process, we will keep going out and sense checking that and engagement. This isn't just a one-off, you send in a form and that's your opportunity. We are continually engaging with them on a regular basis. And it is fluid. We have sorry, I just wanted to finish on that. We also have a process where anybody wants to transfer to any station, that is a live process that people are able to feed into at any time during the year as well. So it's not just a once opportunity.
I'm aware Councillor Lee wishes to speak, but just moving on from that, Mark, we did touch upon earlier about is anyone going to be financially impacted, and what mitigations are being put in place to address that particular situation, more so during these times of cost of living crisis?
So that really links into where people wish to serve. We have still got a significant amount of opportunities for people to serve at stations that do attract that higher rate of nighttime allowances. That's part of the discussions we have with personnel, and if they wish to be serving at a station that just give them that higher rate of remunerations, then that's what we're working to support them in that area. But the Sleaford station and the Lincoln South stations will be the two stations that don't attract the higher rate. However, the balance of that is that they are then also not committed to being away from their families 4 or 5 days at a time. They can spend their evenings and time with their families, which again is also an important factor for people.
Thank you. Councillor Lee.
Thanks, Chair. You reminded me, actually, because I forgot, I meant to ask you before. Nobody will be obliged to work at more than one place if they don't want to, will they? Can you give us that assurance?
So just to confirm, work at 2 locations? Yeah, no, they're only being assigned to 1 location, yeah.
Mark, I think part of the plan is to reinvest back into Sleaford on-call. Nationally, there's a problem recruiting on-call firefighters. So that could be a bit of a challenge there. Do you see that as a problem at Sleaford?
You're absolutely to identify that, and it's something we've raised here on occasions. On-call recruitment is a real focus for us. It is a challenge for us. We've got targeted recruitment within the Sleaford area. What we will be doing is, and what we are doing is, any recruits that are coming through, we are prioritising them on our recruits course to ensure that they are trained up. We're confident that at this moment in time, we've got good levels of on-call availability already at Sleaford Station. So this is about future resilience in regards to there. But the assurance I would like to give is the fact that we are going to be prioritising Sleaford, both with recruitment, but also with our recruits course to get people through to get on that station at the earliest opportunity.
And on that note, I know you prioritise it, but somebody came along today and said, I want to be part of the crew at Sleaford. How long does that process take from the initial interest to actually going through the courses and becoming an on-call firefighter there?
On the basis that they meet all the standards and the testings that are required, which we do run that routinely. We have recruits courses running once a quarter on what I call as our competent to ride course, which will take them 3 months to complete. But we're also running at the same time an alternative recruits course, which is a safe to ride course, which enables them to get experience on the stations and start riding appliances far quicker. Because we are now running both of those courses at the same time, we are regularly running courses throughout the year. So depending on which type of course they wish to attend, because the competent to ride course, yes, they come out of it as a fully competent firefighter, but they're unable to ride the appliance until they complete that. Does take more demand on them giving up their time to attend the courses. The safe to ride is primarily designed because it has less demand on them taking time off their primary employment. So it's depending on what suits their personal circumstances. It will still take at least 6 months, and it can take up to a year. That is really going to be based depending on what the individual's availability is in regards to attending our courses. We have the ability that if we have several people that are wishing to join a station, and if we use Sleaford as an example, that we can run bespoke courses for that stations and move that timeline forward. But the barriers are primarily around individuals' availability and also ensuring that they meet the standards that we require for people to join the service.
Okay, thank you. See no further speakers. I've got no more questions. So thank you for your questions and comments. This now concludes the discussion of this item. I'm going to move that we receive the report and support the proposed changes, and request that our comments, as recorded, are taken under consideration by relevant officers and the portfolio holder. I'm also going to request that a further update following the implementation of the new system is shared with members of this committee in autumn 2023. Can members please raise your hand if you agree? Thank you, that's unanimous, they're all agreed. And thank you, Mark, for both your presentations. Thank you. The next agenda item is agenda item 7, which is a briefing paper on Lincolnshire's Ukraine response. This item is on pages 29 to 36 of the agenda pack, and it provides the committee with assurance on the progress of arrangements established by Lincolnshire County Council, Lincolnshire's district councils and multi-agency partners to deliver the government requirements in relation to the Ukraine humanitarian crisis. Our actions for today are: the committee is invited to review the contents of the report and comment on these and to provide feedback on activities undertaken to date. The report will be presented by Samantha Neal, who is the Assistant Director, Prevention and Early Intervention. Is Samantha on Teams? So over you, if you're there, Samantha, over to you.
I'm here, thank you very much, and my apologies for not joining you. As you can probably hear, my voice is a bit croaky today, I'm full of cold. If I have to give up, Lauren has also joined me and will take over at that point. So yes, this is an update. I think we last came to committee in April, not long after we started to implement the arrangements that we were tasked with by central government. And this paper really covers two parts of activity. So that the first few months, which are set out really on pages 30 to 33, which was very much around receiving new arrivals into the county, getting them settled in, meeting the national requirements around accommodation, around safeguarding and around getting essential payments to those individuals. You'll see from the report multiple agencies supporting us through that. The County Council's role is set out very much at the top of page 30 in the duties that top tier local authorities are given. But we wouldn't be able to do any of what we have been doing without the support of colleagues across a wide range of agencies, and particularly want to just point out the oversight that we have through the Lincolnshire Resettlement Partnership, which is a group that's been operating in Lincolnshire for the past 6 or 7 years. And is chaired by the Deputy Chief Exec at North Kesterton District Council, but also pay huge tribute as well to our colleagues at the Regional Strategic Migration Partnership, who've convened weekly and fortnightly briefings for all regional partners across the East Midlands. So we've been able to work very closely, share intelligence, share working practices, and learn from each other across the region. So the first part of the report, as I say, very much looking at the arrival and settling in. We had large numbers of Ukrainian guests arriving April and May, and that has now slowed. And then we've moved into a second phase, really, which has been much more around those people once they've sort of arrived and caught their breath. Then thinking about their independence, thinking about moving on potentially into new homes, making sure children are settled into school, and making sure that parents have got access to employment and education. Throughout the work we've been doing, we've been taking opportunities to engage with hosts, to engage with guests who've arrived, and to learn and develop our practices we've gone on. So again, the report covers some of the things that we've looked at and supported with. One of the key areas that we picked up right from day one is that our hosts, who've done a fantastic job, were asked initially to host for 6 months. And there was a concern raised nationally that I'm sure you would have seen in national headlines, a concern around potentially hosts terminating that agreement at the end of the 6 months process. So we've done a lot of work in the last few months talking to our hosts to understand their intentions at the 6 months point, but also beyond that. And you'll see from the report that a significant number of our hosts, over 80%, are continuing beyond the 6 month point to support the people that have settled with them. But you'll also see in the report that upwards of 60 of our families have now also secured independent accommodation largely in the private rented sector. So a lot of support, a lot of movement, a lot of change going on. We are in contact with private landlords, with social landlords, and we've boosted the housing support available through our district council colleagues to support that move on process. So a huge amount, I apologise, it's quite a long report, but a huge amount that's taken place over the last 6 months since we last spoke to you. And really, I think the 4 things we wanted to give you assurance on today were that the arrival tasks are all being completed. So the safeguarding, the DBS checks and the payments, that we've got processes in place around those. That the ongoing support for those people once they've arrived is there, and you can see the multiple agencies supporting that. That there's support in crisis, and again there's elements in the report that touch on rematching, and sadly some of our arrangements do break down, so there is a need to step in quite quickly sometimes, but also to give you assurance around the planning ahead, and thinking about both the planned ending of some of those sponsorship arrangements. And just by way of further assurance for you, we are currently doing a piece of work with the council's internal audit team, and we have asked them to look at what we're doing, how that meets the national guidance, and to identify areas of improvement that we think we ought to be making. I'm going to stop at that point before my voice gives up, and open to questions through you, Chairman.
Thank you, Samantha. Do we have any questions? Councillor Sneath.
Thank you, Chair. 2 or 3 things, really. So much in here, and I'm just blown away by how well we've managed this. You know, the level and depth of what we've put into this, I think, is amazing. And I'm really proud of all the officers and staff and all the agencies who've worked with this. Just think, the bike thing interested me because I live in the countryside, and I'd got some spare bikes, and I put them on the roadside near my house, saying free, and very quickly they were taken up. And I'm hoping that the people who had got placements out in the countryside took them and were able to get about on them. You know, it was just such an easy way to do something. And the other thing was, where we've got people who've gone into private rented accommodation, are we actually funding that, or is that people who are working and are able to cover that themselves? That was all, thanks.
Okay, I'm going to ask Lauren to pick up on the bikes one in a second. And if I start with the private rented, where people are making those arrangements themselves, they are coming to those arrangements in the same way as any other member of the public would do. They're talking to the landlord, they're sorting out the bills, and they're getting established. There's national guidance for everybody who's looking for accommodation to tell them the things that they need to do. Where we are supporting people to find private rented accommodation, clearly people who've come haven't got a credit history in the UK. Some of them have some earnings but not sufficient to be able to pay either a deposit or rent. So we've worked very closely with our district council colleagues, working through exactly the same sorts of processes that they do with any person who is looking for support. So the district council will work with them to put together a personal housing plan. They'll look at their income, they'll look at their outgoings, they'll look at how they budget around those. And if there is a need to top up for a short period of time, either a rent deposit or rent payments, then that will be done and supported through the funding that we receive. But it's very much on a case-by-case basis, as it is for anybody who is in that situation. And the district councils are very expert at actually working those through with people. So hopefully that's covered that one. Lauren, do you want to touch on the bikes?
Yeah, so Active Lincolnshire are actually sat round the table of our, we've got a task and finish group that has picked up a lot of the work around wraparound support. And Active Lincolnshire have identified the bike element as an opportunity to do something on a broader scale than just for the Ukrainian cohort. So they're actually currently just getting a project off the ground to look at this for refugees in general, so across all the schemes that we've got operating within the county, and they're working with us to get that off the ground. At the minute, I know that they've got a part-time and temporary project officer in place to lead that. And we've started those discussions. I believe that the council's sustainability team are also involved in those conversations. I know there's a meeting later on this month. So they're working with agencies like Lincolnshire Police as an example. And also I think there's been discussions about use of the orange bikes that you see around Lincoln, to see how we can utilise bikes that, not only from like the example that you just gave where we've got individuals who want to donate bikes that they've got at home, but also work with larger organisations about how we can identify and make fit for purpose those bikes that aren't currently being used and get them out to support people around the county. We just need to carefully pick up processes around making sure people have got relevant safety equipment, that the bikes are fit for purpose, and that there are road safety measures in place. But that's all part of the project that Active Lincolnshire have volunteered to lead.
Councillor Gray.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And Samantha, thanks for the report. Just a couple of questions, if I may. I noticed in the report that it shows that Lincolnshire is the 70th most popular nationally and the second in the region. I wondered if there had been any feedback as to why Lincolnshire has been so favoured. And also, secondly, I see that 12% of hosting arrangements are broken down in the 6 months. I'm just wondering if you have got any feedback on that, any reoccurring themes, why that is, please.
Okay, so if I take the first question and Lauren perhaps take the second one. So in terms of the numbers and where we sit, if you like, that is purely down to the number of people in Lincolnshire who have proactively put themselves forward to say, I've got a home, I've got a space, and I would really like to host somebody. So I think that says a huge amount about people in Lincolnshire and about their willingness to reach out to people who they see are in distress. It has purely been the number of people who have said, we can help, we want to help, and who have been able to match with somebody. So it's not something that any of the local authorities have done. It's not something that government has done. This is really about, as I say, local people who either have space in their own home, or in some cases they've got an annex, or they've got a property that they were willing to make available. And I think that's to the credit of all of Lincolnshire, and says a lot about our communities. Lauren, do you want to pick up the second point?
Yeah, so breakdowns and that 12%, that stayed pretty static over the last 6 months. I think it's very complex, and actually in terms of themes, there probably aren't themes that I would pick out in terms of, oh, this is the reason why arrangements are breaking down. But I would just highlight that I think it often links back to maybe not having open and honest conversations from the outset, and actually that the arrangements that tend to remain more stable are the ones where there's maybe been some what could be perceived as difficult conversations from the get-go. So where people have, both parties, not just the hosts, have been able to really openly set out their expectations of the arrangement, and yeah, just talk those matters through before the arrangement starts, and then maybe periodically sit down and review over a cup of tea and a slice of cake, and actually make that part of the arrangement routine. That's something that we were able to pick up on when we delivered our face-to-face host, both existing and prospective host sessions around the county. Expectations was something that we were able to talk about in quite detail, and just give some hints and tips. And again, it's something that's coming out in the newsletter that we put out every 2 weeks. So we've got an e-newsletter that goes out to all hosts and now all guests as well. And we're able to, we've gathered some case studies from arrangements that have progressed really well, and then been able to tease out host top tips and provide that advice and guidance. But yeah, I would say that open and honest communication from the start is the key to success, really.
And I think, just to add to that, anybody who's had family come and stay in their home, with perhaps teenagers, with young children, you love your family to bits, but it's lovely when they go. And I think it's probably the common theme is just the pressure of having other people in the house, and it's not. It can be absolutely joyful, but it can be also really hard work having other people staying within the same four walls as yourself. So I think hats off and tribute to all of those people, however long their sponsorship has lasted. It's been a huge ask of people, and they've really stepped up.
Thank you. Councillor Mr Clark, followed by Councillor Key.
Thank you, Chairman. I was interested regarding the accommodation, and it mentioned suitability or unsuitability. What are the criteria that are laid down regarding what is required for their accommodation?
That's a really good question. It wasn't clear at the outset. So what we have done is work again very closely with our district council colleagues who are experts in housing standards, and our housing standards officer colleagues have visited every property prior to arrival. So they have gone into those homes, they have looked at all of the things that you would expect in terms of health and safety, in terms of things like, are there stair gates, are there smoke alarms, are there things that can be sensibly put in place. There have been a very small number of properties that have been deemed unsuitable. And I think we have had one or two challenges around this, particularly in Lincolnshire, and we were very quick to raise nationally some questions around suitability. So, for example, is a caravan in somebody's garden suitable? And our view was no. The expectation was that this would be at least a 6-month arrangement and hopefully a 12-month arrangement. So we took a view very quickly with our housing colleagues in the district councils that unless there was a really, really strong strong reason why that was suitable. We would not accept that as suitable. But beyond that, as I say, I think we're looking at single figures of the number of houses. There's been over 600 homes that have been inspected. We're looking at single figures where those homes weren't deemed suitable. As a follow-up, not specifically around the quality of the home, but our fire and rescue colleagues have done a follow-up visit for us. So in effect, we've had 2 visits to the home, one pre-arrival, which our housing colleagues in the district councils have undertaken. But our fire and rescue colleagues then did a follow-up safe and well check visit after the arrival of the family. So we've seen it in 2 separate situations, if you like, one just as the home, as the accommodation as it stands, and then again once the people have arrived in there. And that hasn't been specifically to inspect the accommodation. That's been more about checking in, making sure everything's is working as it should do, being able to raise a flag if anything feels untoward. But it has given us 2 bites of the cherry, and allowed us to provide pieces of equipment, etc., if that has been needed. So hopefully, does that answer your question? I think the key from our point of view in the outset was that the government didn't define it very clearly. We've taken very much a standard approach, as we would do with any accommodation that's being inspected by housing standards, and we've given ourselves a double look as far as we possibly can to see that not only is the house appropriate without people in it, but it also is once people have arrived.
Thank you. That's very reassuring.
Thank you. Councillor Key.
Yeah, thank you. First, I'd just like to echo what Councillor Sneath said about how humbling it is that these people have done all this for people in such crisis. It really is, and shows what a welcoming place Lincolnshire is. And it's also, I'm delighted to hear that some of these guests are deciding to make this their home, which is equally as satisfying. That's lovely. On page 34, I just wanted to pick up about the ones who are wanting to go back to Ukraine, which is quite understandable. That's their home. Is there any contact kept with these people after they've gone to make sure they're safe? Because war is so unpredictable and we never know what's going to happen next. You know, are they able to come back again if it's not what they expected when they get there? Thank you.
Are you happy for me to answer that one, Sam? Yeah, so very recent example of this. Only yesterday I've made contact with a lady because a host has notified us that she's chosen to return to Ukraine simply because her 3.5-year-old son is desperately missing his father. So people are making some really difficult decisions. Some people are returning because they feel it is safe to do so. Others are returning knowing that it might not still be safe, but actually weighing up all their options. They just want to go back and be with their relatives who unfortunately have had to stay out there. Yes, we do maintain contact. I can't categorically say that we do in all cases, because it wouldn't be tenable. But where we're notified by a host that a guest has returned, certainly if we believe that that's on a temporary basis only, we will absolutely make contact with them to check in and make sure they understand their options for if they want to and need to return to England and to Lincolnshire. The visa does allow them to do that. So once the visa's issued, it's a 3-year visa. And once they've got their BRP, so they convert that 6 months leave to remain into the 3 years, then they can come and go essentially as they please within that 3-year window. What we do have to just be mindful of and caveat with people is that at the minute there isn't clarity from the government as to when. So almost like when the duty for local authorities ends and when the duty of hosts ends within that 3 year. It was designed to be a scheme for 12 months from start to finish. So the example, if someone went back to Ukraine and then wanted to return after 18 months, we are actually waiting for clarification from ministers around what that means. It's because there is some confusion for hosts. Are they indefinitely needing to leave their door open for a 3-year period or not? That's part of the scheme that's currently not clear. But yeah, we stay in touch, and this lady is an example. Yesterday, she's returned home, and the host is really keen to support another family. So he asked for our help to try and gain clarity from mum as to whether it was her intention to stay in Ukraine on a longer term basis or come back, because he's just keen to support us by offering his home out for a rematch. And I suppose that's the difficult position that hosts can find themselves in, knowing how to prioritise their support.
Thank you. At least that's some consolation in the short term if people are making these difficult decisions, and I can't imagine how awful it is for them to have to decide where to be. So thank you for all you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Regarding the rematch, in the 12% of experiences we've had with arrangements breaking down, what were the causes? I know you touched upon this, and there'd be things like costs for hosts and personal circumstances, etc. Have we looked at mitigating these as to ensure that the percentage drops in the future? For instance, are they designated support and training perhaps for hosts to cope with the impact of hosting these traumatised families?
Yeah, I think we've been able to pick up on that through our e-newsletter. That's proven to be a really valuable tool for us to be able to communicate with our hosts and guests. And we've also got the wellbeing service who, you know, they stood up a dedicated service right from day one, and that's changed as evolved, just as the scheme has done and the presenting issues have. So the wellbeing service now are able to offer mediation. Sometimes I think it's just about a professional stepping into a space and supporting a difficult conversation. So any hosts or guests who are having difficulties in an arrangement, if they want support or help, they can approach the wellbeing service and ask for that, and we will step in and support them. I think we need to just acknowledge that it's people, and people are complex. What we're not seeing is really clear set themes as to why these are breaking down. It can be from one extreme to another. We had an arrangement that broke down, you know, over storage of food items, as an example, versus another arrangement breaking down because hosts just haven't been able to adapt to having small children in their home. I think sometimes you think you can be capable of something, and it's not until you actually do it and live it. And we're just here to support hosts that find themselves, the small percentage that have found themselves in that position, we're here to support. Sometimes it's simply just down to a clash of personalities. And let's not forget that these people are matching via, often, rightly or wrongly, by social media. And there'll be great differences as to just how much communication is had in the time it takes for that visa to be issued. So people haven't necessarily had the time to get to know each other. So that's a really huge step to take, isn't it? To barely knowing someone to then cohabiting in potentially quite close quarters for an extended period of time. So when we're stepping into the space in terms of rematching, we're spending a lot of time and providing a lot of support to make sure that before we recommend an arrangement goes ahead, that we encourage those relationships to start to be built before moving. And we also we've developed question sets, so we get lots and lots of information from our guests and hosts to make sure that if we're suggesting a rematch, it makes sense. So even coming down to things like who's a smoker, who's a non-smoker, and whether, you would be happy with those sort of differences in lifestyle existing in the house. And I'm not sure that those specific and intricate details have been discussed in all self-arranged arrangements.
Thank you. Glenn, I'll bring you in at this point.
Thank you, Chair. The Council provides a very wide range of services to Lincolnshire residents, and as part of that has quite a considerable array of experts undertaking those activities. Neither Sem nor Lauren would have expected to develop what is an entirely new area of specialty for the Council and a range of expertise which reflects not only Ukrainian guests coming to Lincolnshire, but other communities who come here because of the circumstances they face back in their home countries. Think about Afghan refugees as well. And I think it's due regard to both Sem, Lauren, and also colleagues elsewhere, building on Councillor Sneef's point earlier, which is that you've got officers who are not just doing the day job terribly well, you've got officers who are able to incorporate totally new areas of activity and expertise, and learning as they go with this one, particularly given that the programme is beginning to mature beyond the original setup arrangements. And I personally feel that that says a lot about not just the residents of Lincolnshire, but your staff.
Thank you, Glenn. Councillor Mr Clark.
Sorry, Chairman, I thought I got it on. Page 35, mitigating homelessness. Have we had any situations where somebody's literally been on the street and we've had no contact from them?
I can come in on that, Sam, and categorically say no. That hasn't happened in Lincolnshire. No family has been street homeless. And I would like to provide assurance today that no family will be street homeless into the future as well. We actually go above and beyond in Lincolnshire to track these families as well. From speaking to, so when you look at the council guidance, a lot of it can be interpreted in different ways. And we've done quite a lot of engagement regionally and nationally. I've had various conversations with my equivalents in other authorities. And I think it's safe to say that the team that we've got within LCC, so I've got 2 operational managers who really do go above and beyond. So if we're made aware that, for example, a visa is issued and then a sponsor pulls out of the arrangement, I've got staff dedicated to getting in touch with those prospective guests, finding out what their plans are, finding out that they're safe and well. And, that's something that's not necessarily seen. It's not explicitly requested of councils within the guidance, but our stance is that we've got a duty of care. It can be very, very time consuming. But actually, there's been a couple of examples of my staff tracking down families. So especially where children are involved, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if I knew that a family might have entered the country in Lincolnshire or outside of Lincolnshire, and I didn't know that they weren't street homeless. So we do take those additional steps to track people down and just basically say, are you okay? And do you need any help from us in Lincolnshire?
And I would just add to that, the government requirement is for us to answer 5 questions on a national database. And we decided very early on that, first of all, the database in its early stages was difficult to use and it wasn't very comprehensive. But we decided probably within the first 2 weeks that we needed to carefully track everybody to understand where they were. And that has paid dividends because people have moved in and out of Lincolnshire. As you've heard, some people have gone back to Ukraine and then come back here. We've had people whose arrangement they have literally been in transit, as Lauren's just described, and arrived to find that something has changed. And we can, hand on heart, tell you that we know the location of everybody who has been allocated to Lincolnshire and where they are now. And we were recently contacted through the Strategic Migration Partnership of the East Midlands to ask us to help out another council who hadn't done that. The consequence for them was that they were now in difficulty negotiating their financial arrangements with central government because there was a difference of opinion between the government and the local authority on how many people had arrived, how many were still here, and therefore what payment they should receive. We did this partly because we needed that track record, but as Lauren said, these are predominantly mums, grandmas, and children. The vast majority are ladies travelling alone, ladies travelling with children. And that creates additional vulnerabilities around their mental well-being, around the scope for people disappearing or not, us not being clear where they are. So what we can say is, going back to your question, is that there have been a few people who have been at risk of homelessness, where, again, working with the expertise of our district colleagues, they have had temporary accommodation provided for them. So again, we know nobody through this scheme has been on the street, simply because with those relationships, if somebody is at risk immediately, we can find accommodation in a bed and breakfast, in a hotel, while we can find something else. So again, absolutely normal practice in terms of homelessness, but we are absolutely on the case in terms of knowing where everybody is.
Thank you very much. It's great that you're doing such a very good job.
Thank you. Regarding the cost of living crisis, you mentioned in the report about looking into increased payments over the winter period. I think it's true to say that since the first arrivals in March, April time, we've had relatively good weather. And now with the shorter days, longer nights and colder weather, what problems, if any, do you envisage? And also leading on to that, I'm aware that Lord Harrington, the former Refugees Minister, he'd asked for payments to be increased up to, I think it was £700 a month. Can you tell me where we are with that? So what problems you may envisage over the winter period, and also about this £700 a month, please?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. Lord Harrington had previously, I think initially had been looking at this 6-month point and the risk of homelessness at the 6-month point. So back in July, August, what we were hearing, and in fact Lauren was invited to be on a working group with the Department for Levelling Up to test thinking around this, was that the thinking at that point was to increase the host payment, to incentivise people to go beyond the 6-month period. So that was very much the steer at that time. Lord Harrington then subsequently resigned, and we haven't heard anything since from central government. Again, despite Lauren having been involved recently in another task force meeting, we are still on tenterhooks waiting for government guidance about a whole raft of things. And I have to say that's been the case throughout the process, that we tend to get some guidance and then a promise that some more will follow. So what we are aware of is that a number of other councils across the country have increased payments to hosts for a number of different reasons. For some of them, it's been more about just a thank you, recognising the fact that it's arduous in some cases, and in some cases they have related it to increasing costs. We're not aware of any of our hosts who have said to us that the increased cost is a cause of a breakdown. But increased costs of having people in your house, if you're heating more rooms, etc., may be an issue for some people. So we are in conversation around that. We have been talking to our regional colleagues. Again, there's no one particular pattern, and I think the difficulty for us is that we don't want to go outside the government guidance that we have been given, and some local authorities are choosing to do that in the absence of anything clearly coming from central government. What I can say is that in the last 2 weeks, we have written to Michael Gove. We have asked clarification for a number of points. one of which is whether any underspend in the current financial year can be carried into next year. One of which is whether any new arrivals after April will also be funded. But one question very specifically is around what is the government's intention around this particular issue with this cohort of individuals. So we're waiting a response on that, and I think as soon as we get that, we'll be able to perhaps put something back to the committee through Democratic Services just to outline the response that we've received.
Okay, thank you. Did you answer the other part of my question about what do you envisage the problems during the longer nights and shorter days and colder weather?
At the moment, we're not seeing anything locally that is suggesting that. We have made provision, I think, through both free school meals and through school uniform grants to people. So we've picked up on some of those things as we've come across them. I think the key to this is probably the mechanism that Lauren's already mentioned in terms of the newsletters and the two-way communication that we have with folks. At the moment, I think you're probably right. I think it's still reasonably mild. We haven't hit snow. We haven't hit really bad weather yet. But again, it's something that we're in contact with our regional colleagues around. I don't think, as I say at the moment, that anybody is saying that cost or increased cost is a reason for breakdowns. But clearly, if there are more people in a household using the washing machine more often, using more hot showers, etc., there may well be cost implications for people.
Okay. No other speakers. I'll carry on. I attended OSMB on the 26th of October, and I can recall the chairman highlighting that we need a scrutiny mechanism for migrations, including all the various forums and schemes. As the report shared with this committee does not include all schemes running concurrently, e.g. full asylum dispersal programme, can we ensure going forward to add an update on concurrently running schemes to these reports? Example, Homes for Ukraine sponsorship programme. Can we have an update on this in, say, next month will be too soon, so January's meeting, please?
January, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. January makes perfect sense, and I think it's been alluded to earlier in the meeting. There are several different programmes running now, all with different responsibilities, different cohorts of people. I think there's still a lot of uncertainty about how some of those will impact in Lincolnshire, but there are meetings starting to happen that I think will give us the clarity that you're looking for by January. So we'll be able to at that point give you a further update on Homes for Ukraine, but also set out for you the range of other schemes, the numbers of people involved, and some of the issues that are facing not just local government, but the NHS and the wider infrastructure, if you like, in terms of the direction of travel in the next sort of 6 to 12 months.
Thank you. Also, do we have an estimate or risk assessment of local risk to homelessness and a wider picture homelessness rates forecasted in the county, given the cost of living crisis and added pressures widely diffused in our communities? The report indicates that the HFU team is contacting all hosts whose guests arrived 4 months previously to check in, gather information, offer advice, and a RAG rate. The arrangement based on its sustainability, 16% of guest groups of the surveyed hosts to date may require alternative accommodation within the county on page 33, I believe. Could you reply to that?
So homelessness in general is really closely monitored by DLUC, working with district council colleagues, and usually around this time of year there is what's known as a homelessness count, and Councillor Gray will probably know far better than me, but that usually takes place around November time. So district council colleagues will be looking at that in the round for all communities, and again, if it's something the committee is interested in, we can ask for a statement on that to add into that report, because clearly there's some risks of interdependencies. Lauren, do you want to just pick up on the specific about the survey calls that we've been doing?
Yeah, so that's a rolling programme of work now, and that's carrying on. Obviously, the majority of people arrived in around May time, April, May, June, but we do still have new arrivals coming in, so we'll continue to periodically check in around that 4-month mark. We're fortunate in Lincolnshire currently in that we've got a good pool of potential rematch hosts. And we're really engaged in that piece of work. So the report refers to a ready homes list that we're in the midst of developing. We've currently got around 47 properties on that list that we're proactively checking, having advanced conversations with potential hosts who might be able to host a family who've already been in the county for a 6-month period in the future. Also importantly, as we're seeing the churn that Sem referred to, so we are seeing families manage to navigate themselves into the private rental sector. Those hosts that notify us that their initial family have left, we do engage with them further about the notion of hosting again. So we're in constant conversations to try and bolster our safety net, if you like, and support families. What's sometimes challenging is managing expectations. So I think that's something that we've been able to again pick up through dedicated comms to guests at that 4-month mark, and also through the bi-weekly newsletter. The majority of people hosting may never have had to navigate social housing systems, so don't understand the challenges in available social housing, and also you wouldn't expect it to be the case, but Ukrainian guests don't necessarily have an understanding of how social housing, private rented sector works in the UK. So we're sharing lots of information on that front and being really upfront and open from the get-go that actually for some families, depending on their financial position, depending on their location and you know the numbers in their group, for some families being hosted again for a further 6-month period is the best available option to them, and we're there to support them in that journey.
Thank you. Just one more from myself. Coming from a relatively small community myself, I'd be interested to know what means of communications are being exploited to carry on messages to the local communities. Are we doing all we can? Do you feel we're doing all we can? And how can we help spread messages, please?
Oh gosh, that's a really good one. Thank you for that. We have done a number of things. We have a dedicated comms officer based within North Kesterton District Council, and she has worked quite closely with the press to do a number of things really. I think first of all to ask for anybody who is interested in hosting who hasn't put themselves forward previously. So that again hopefully extends our pool. I would have to say that hasn't generated much positive response, but we're plugging away at that. She's also gathered some really effective case studies, I think, both from hosts and guests about their experience, about what they've learned since they've arrived, and those have been going out through local press, etc. I think there has been a range of community groups, a little bit like we saw in COVID, where community groups sprang up. We've seen quite a lot of local community groups pop up, and we've been working closely with colleagues in the voluntary sector to understand what those groups need and whether they need anything from us to sustain and support what they're doing. And they have been really instrumental. I'm thinking of Louth because I happen to see that one, but Boston and other places as well have set up local support groups. They've arranged activities for children. They've organised socials and sports and quizzes and all sorts of different things. So it very much depends on local areas. But I would say as local councillors, if you see any of those groups in your areas, please do say hello to them. Please do connect them with us if there's anything that they need. And in terms of wider community awareness, I think it's a really interesting one, isn't it? Because one of the challenges I think we've had a little bit is that there was an expectation that our Ukrainian guests perhaps would be very downtrodden, very needy. And actually, they're you and me. They had homes, they had jobs, they had cars, they got up in the morning, had the breakfast, took the kids to school. You know, they lived lives very similar to us. And I think there's perhaps been a bit of a misconception in some areas that you know that these are very capable, very articulate, educated people, and who are just getting started, I think. So I think in terms of messages and communications, probably I think we share, Lauren, the fortnightly newsletter. If not, that's now available on Connect to Support Lincolnshire, so you'll be able to see that. And if you're interested just to see the range of support that is available, there is a Ukraine page on Connect to Support Lincolnshire. So perhaps familiarising yourselves with that and being able to use that as a point of contact would be great. We're also just starting a piece of work now around employment opportunities. We know some of our guests went into employment very, very quickly. Others have taken a little bit longer to find their feet, but we're now doing some work with DWP and also with colleagues in our Place Directorate to start to really understand the skill set, the aspirations, the sorts of things that people want to be doing in terms of employment. So again, I think it might be something that as we take that forward, we could perhaps share that information with you in January, thinking about again how we perhaps use some of the networks that you as councillors might have to promote employment opportunities and promote you know the very huge skill set and experience that people have brought with them. So yeah, please have a look at Connect to Support. The newsletters are on there, and if you've got local groups in your areas, again, any contact you have with them, anything they need, give us a shout.
Okay, thank you. I can see no further questions. So thank you for your questions and comments. This now concludes the discussion of this item. I'm going to move that we endorse the report and that we request our feedback comments from the debate to be taken under consideration. Moreover, we ask that in the next update to the committee, a breakdown of all schemes undertaken and those to be delivered in the future is provided as a report entitled Resettlement Schemes. This is to be in January 2023, which will also include an update on the Homes for Ukraine sponsor scheme. Can members please raise your hand if you agree? Okay, that's unanimous, thank you. And thank you, Samantha and Lauren, for your report.
Thank you.
We'll now move on to agenda item 8, which is the Public Protection and Community Scrutiny Committee Work Programme. This item is on pages 37 to 40 of the agenda pack. The report will be presented by Tracy Johnson, Senior Scrutiny Officer. The actions are the committee is in, you need a yellow jacket on. Yeah, the committee is invited to review the work programme and highlight any additional scrutiny activity which could be included for consideration of the work programme. And I'll bring my glasses next time. So over to you, Tracy.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a few changes to report to the work programme. A report on the budget proposals for 2023-2024 will be added to the 24th of January agenda. And this is to enable the committee to provide feedback on the budget proposals for the different service areas. And these will then be fed back to the Executive and Council in February. Following the outcomes from today's meeting, a report on the resettlement schemes will be added to the 24th of January agenda as well. And we'll also look at adding the update on the implementation of the new crewing arrangements to a meeting in the autumn. So I'll ask Chiara to liaise with Mark and yourself, Chairman, about a suitable date. Otherwise, welcome any suggestions from members of the committee.
Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was just confirming from last meeting, we have now confirmation of when the inspectors are coming to give us an update on our protection, which was the item for next meeting. They are coming into service at the end of November. However, we won't be getting our hot debrief until the 16th of December. So my request would be for us to move that report to the January agenda when we'll have full details.
Okay, thank you. Noted, Tracy. Okay, thank you. Have we any comments on the work programme? Councillor Mrs Clark.
Thank you, Chair. I was wondering if we could have an update, a review, which is due. I think I brought it to Scrutiny earlier on this year in January about the community trigger. It's about antisocial behaviour and the community trigger opportunity for residents who feel they need to look further to resolve any situations that may not have been addressed, and the qualifying situation around that they need to report something 3 times, and if it's still not been resolved, they need to talk about it and bring other authorities and partners together so that they can find some resolution for that. I'd be interested to know about a review about that piece of work that sits within the Community Safety Partnership. Thank you.
Thank you. I can recall your previous interest in that. Is that noted?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I did notice under the to-be programme there's antisocial behaviour, including the community trigger strategy, so I'll ask Kiara to look into having that scheduled.
So it is noted, but we're not got a programme date for it. Yeah, sure. Councillor Mr Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. In January, we've got the trading standards are going to give us a food update, but in view of the activity over the Christmas period of rogue traders, etc., I wondered whether we could have a small comment or brief as to the what activities the trading standards were able to, deal with regarding rogue traders over the Christmas period.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Clark. Again, that'll be noted, and we'll liaise with the Trading Standards Department. Yep, thank you. Thank you for your questions and comments. This now concludes the discussion of this item. I'm going to move that we note the report and approve the existing work programme as detailed on pages 37 to 40 and the additional items mentioned today and from today's discussion. Can I ask you to raise your hands if you agree? Thank you. That is agreed. That now brings us to the end of the meeting. That now concludes the business of the meeting. Thank you everyone for your attendance. You may now leave the council chamber when you're ready. Thank you.